Okay, let's break down what we might see in some reflective objects and some transparent objects as we might see them in a reference photo or in real life. There are some things that happen specific to those two situations that are worth learning to see and learning to break down. So we'll start with reflective objects, which are objects that are reflecting light back to us, but we can't see through them. And so in this case, I have this cylinder here that we're going to look at and try and piece apart what we're seeing. So something you might notice about reflective objects is the sense of light and shadow is gone, or it's just not as easy to see. So you don't see center light, halftone, core shadow, reflected light. You do still see the cast shadow because that's not part of the reflective object, but the other parts of light and shadow don't show up on the object the way we might be used to them if this cylinder was white or something. What's happening here is that the object is no longer diffusing the light that hits it. Instead, it's sending all of the light information back out. So instead of showing us the light and how it falls on the object, it's showing us the environment all around. So in this cylinder, what has happened here is that light that usually is diffused all over the light side of the object has been condensed into this strip here. If this were not reflective, that might be the lightest part, the center light of the object. And then otherwise it's showing us the environment all around. So down here we see the table, this blue striped table. We can see it here stretching off this way. So this corner here is a reflection of the corner that's off the side of the page there. This corner here is a reflection of the corner that's off this side. And this here is the reflection of the corner that's down. What also happens is any incidental light sources, so windows or background lighting that's not the lamp that's lighting this thing, also show up. So these long gray strips, these are like from windows in the background that are just spilling a little bit of light. They show up much clearer in the object. So the object shows us, instead of the light shadow differences that we're used to seeing, it shows us the environment, the whole room. We do still see the highlight. Because the highlight is a reflection of the light source, it's going to show up in a reflective object just like it would in a shiny object. Here's something that I want to make painfully clear. Right here in these highlights, you see there's this star shape, all of these rays going off of the highlight. That is an artifact of the camera lens. So that's happening in the camera, not in real life. Please do not add those to your drawing, those dings that sparkle out like that. It can end up making the drawing look, I don't know what the best word to say is, it cheapens the drawing to add those little star reflections. It's almost like if someone smiled and their tooth went ding. It just feels cheesy almost. So please don't add them in the drawing. It's much better to just describe the light source so it's a round lamp. So you have a round highlight that's diffusing out gently but doesn't have these star things radiating off of it. The reflections of the environment that the object is reflecting back to us, they take on the nature of this object. So this cylinder is tall and thin, and so all of the surrounding information is getting condensed into these tall, thin strips. Let's flip over to this sphere to see what's happening in the sphere. Once again, we have the table that's getting distorted and reflected into this sphere. We have this vase with a stick in it being reflected in this side. You see, we have the highlight still strong as ever. Even the highlight here is getting reflected in this reflective ball and back to us, and so on. But the environment here now has taken on the nature of the sphere. So we see the whole back room, but everything is curved. This whole area here, all the way around on this sphere, is a reflection of the board that's behind it with this blue fabric. It's just reflecting all the way around the sphere. So that shows you how much distortion this sphere is causing. Last thing to talk about with reflective objects is how clear the distinctions between light and shadow shapes are. So look at how sharp this edge is. Sharp edge, sharp, 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 sharp. There's hard edges all over the place. All right, let's talk about transparent objects. The transparent objects reflect just like the reflective objects do. So if I look at this vase here, and in fact, let's click back to this. If I look at this vase here, when I turn these backlights on, you can see them turning on and off in the transparent object as well. So it's much fainter. It doesn't show up as strongly, but we still are getting reflections of the whole room and environment in this transparent object. The main thing with it is we are also, though, seeing through this object. So you can see both things happening. So there's the stripes from the table being reflected in this object. There's also the blue of this back here being seen through the object. So the transparent objects often are a little trickier to deal with even than reflective objects because you have to break apart these shapes and figure out what's going on. Knowing what to look for helps you decide what is important to include and what's okay to edit out. So I would keep that in mind as we talk about the things that we see here. Right, we still see any highlights are still going to show up in a transparent object, just like a reflective object. Maybe it's throwing less light back to us, so it's a little more clear on the transparent object here. Any reflections, as I said, they're going to be subtle. There are a few other things that happen with transparent objects that are really worth paying attention to, and that is that they tend to bend light as it passes through them. Because of that, things that we see through transparent objects will get distorted and bent. This is called refraction, and it's something to pay close attention to when you're drawing. So I'm going to zoom us in here. Here we have this stick coming in. As soon as it hits the rim of this vase, look what happens right here. That stick gets bent. The light from the stick, it doesn't just pass unaffected through. It gets distorted because there's a lip on this glass that changes directions a little bit. It's distorting the edge of that stick and it's stretching it out here and it's notching it in there. And as I go down this stick, you'll see that happen over and over again. Here's the shoulder of the vase coming out towards us. It has snapped that stick in two so that the stick appears to be kind of wavy here, and then it just pinches off and picks up offset down here. And the reason it's getting distorted is because this shoulder of glass is bending the light. When we get out here where the glass is facing us again, now the stick takes on its regular appearance again because we're kind of looking straight through the glass like a window in on the stick. And then we hit water, and water refracts as well. So you can see as soon as that stick hits the water, it shoots off to the side because the water is bending the light. And then down in the water is acting like a lens and it's making this stick bigger. It's magnifying it. So we have a stick down here that's bigger than the stick up here. And then as the stick gets down towards the bottom here, we get the glass edge here that's curving away from us. So here the glass is pretty straight. We're seeing straight through it. Here we start to see it on a curve, and you can see that stick bending again down there at the bottom of that curve. So that's a lot going on, but you can learn a lot from a stick, leaning in a vase, going into water. There's a lot about light that you can learn just from looking at this stick. And if you can catch those things, that disruption there, that offset, and then this offset and twist because of the water, and then this magnification, and then this little bend at the end, those are all things that your brain is doing as you look at this vase to tell you that there's water in there and it's glass. It's what we inherently interpret when we see things. We just don't know that that's happening because we've never had to face it before. Well, now as a person who's drawing this stuff, you kind of have to face it and try to understand what's happening so that you can replicate it and make that happen convincingly in your drawings. One other thing that the liquid-filled object will do, because it acts like a lens, it tends to focus light. And so the light that's hitting this object, which is coming from above and to the right slightly, is going to be bent and focused down through that water and give us quite a strong light down here in the bottom of the cast shadow. And it's not something we would normally even consider, that the cast shadow has this blazing light in it. But if we look at this dark blue stripe in the cast shadow, it's as light as the stripe out here and maybe even a little bit lighter because the light source is being focused here in that shadow. We get a really big glow down here on the stick and in the bottom of the vase on this white stripe. For the same reason, the water is gathering the light and focusing it down there in the cast shadow. And you will see that anytime you have a vase or a cup or something transparent that has water in it, it will gather that light and focus it down here opposite wherever the light source is. So here it's above, it's going to focus it below. It's happening here as well. You have the light source up and to the left, and it's focusing all of that light into the cast shadow down here. So be on the lookout for that in transparent objects as well, particularly when they have water in them. They focus the light down there in the cast shadow. Okay, so that's a breakdown of stuff to watch out for in transparent and reflective objects. This is just a breakdown of what's happening visually. For a drawing approach, please watch the video of the drawing being done. It's going to be a time-lapse video that just shows you the drawing happening quickly. The main point there being, be sure to work from general, easy to deal with stuff down to the specifics. Don't shoot for these highlights and these tight little transitions before you get the overall information in. Okay, so that's the visual breakdown of reflective and transparent. I would suggest that you take notes on these things. I've got them in the assignment for you, but take notes of these different things that happen and see if you can see them happening in other objects. The better you get at identifying these things, the better decisions you're going to make about them in your drawing.